Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. Fantastic lunch and an even more fantastic 2 o'clock session. So, thank you for coming back. I'm really excited to hear from each of these guys and also see how they react to what they say about the topic. Today is Mental Health Day across the world. It's a very important topic, but this trend from wellness to well-being, I think, is a big corporate pivot that has happened in the last few years, likely accelerated by things like COVID that all of us unexpectedly had to experience. So, with that, my role is just to make sure our panelists speak because that's who you want to hear from. So, I'll start with my good friend Yuka, who is on my left. Her company name, by the way, is Yay, Yeey. But I've known her as a senior executive at Unilever for many years in Japan, Asia, and beyond. So, I know this topic around well being is one that you've had great passion for. You've talked about it, written about it, done it. What are your thoughts on the topic? And I'll ask each of the panelists to make an opening comment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Miki-san, and thank you very much for all to come. And then the topic of well-being is my favorite. So although I don't eat lunch today, I'm so happy here to be here to talk about well-being. And then, by the way, my the name of my new company is Yay, which means I really wish everyone on the planet to be Yay and always, so that I do everything.
Can we try that, everyone?
Yay. If you want my Meishi name card, please come later. Anyway, so this company, the mission is to make everyone's well-being upgraded. So this is really the topic I really want to discuss today. And maybe one thing I can first kickstart the discussion or panel is well-being is very important and beneficial to management and for corporate activity because some data already showed that for people who have the higher well-being, productivity will be 30% up, sales 37% up, and then creativity necessary for innovation will be 300% up. So these data already shows the importance of well-being of each employee that would directly link to the corporate sales as well as corporate future. So that's maybe one message that I really want to say. And then I'm also happy that these two gentlemen are the leader of the big corporation that also will be representing how the well-being is important to the corporate scene.
Thank you, Yuka. I know this is the business session, so we like numbers. I do think that it's interesting that very concrete numbers have surfaced. And not all corporations have embraced it, though. But I think Inagaki-san is a leader in the field, as well as obviously leading one of the largest insurance companies in Japan. So I wanted to ask you to speak a bit about well-being, how you embrace it. And you also noted to me that it is interesting that corporate investors are now asking about it and will continue to do so.
Thank you. Thank you for a very nice introduction. And thank you, Yuka-san, for setting the hurdle a little bit high. Yes.
High well-being.
Yes, of course. So I'd like to talk. There's three aspects on my business that is about well-being. The first is our customer. So insurance is a thing that you buy or purchase to protect your downside or economic downside. Now in Japan, roughly 90% of the household owns some kind of protection. So I think we have, meet the social demand in those areas. But the ultimate goal of us is to not just to protect the downside, but provide, happiness to their life. So, having cancer or having a very critical illness is not good. So we want to promote health and also to be happy. There's three elements to become well-being or happy on your life. First one is health. The second one is money. This is a fact. Now people live to 100 years. They might outlive their savings. So it is a social challenge, especially for Japanese who has longer longevity. And the third one is connection between the society. And there are people who are very rich and who are very healthy, who walks like 10,000 steps a day, but their well-being is low because they are lonely. Especially the challenge in Japan is that the households, a single household is now the percentage is the highest, and given the aging population, that will be continues to be our challenge. So in business, so I want to promote well-being of our customer. The second one is, as a CEO, to deliver happiness to our clients, our employees has to be happy and motivated. And the third one is, which you touched on, is the investment part. Daiichi Life as a group have 60 trillion yen in assets and invests in various investment vehicles. And we want to reach for high investment returns. And we are now analyzing, when we analyze a company, we want to, look on the non-financial aspect of the company. Which company stands out? Which company is more resilient? And the well-being factor is I think will be the factor X, especially because you can buy anything in this world. You can do a team lift. You can employ or purchase a certain division of a company, but to have a good corporate culture, you cannot achieve that in day one. So those three aspects that I am committed in well-being. And let me stop here.
Thank you so much, Seiji. Let me actually pivot to Sheila, who's been waiting patiently in London at 6 a.m. to join us today. Just lifting off of what Seiji just talked about, Sheila, I know you've written a fabulous book actually around flexible ways of working, new ways of working, and I know you have a ton of data you'd also like to share with the audience. I did notice that the United Nations put out the World Happiness Index again in 2020, and Japan, sadly, is sort of at the bottom of the list. So we are the least happy people, but I do think that we, like the rest of the countries around the world, are embracing, struggling, experimenting with this new ways of working stuff. So perhaps you can comment there as what you see globally and locally.
Sure. Thank you so much, Miki-san. And even though it's 6 a.m. in London, I'm still feeling the yay as well, being part of the panel. So appreciate
remarkably great for a 6 a.m.
So much of the conversation today about flexibility globally is how many days are you expecting your employees to come back into the office? It's about location. And what we're missing in that conversation is that flexibility is more than just where you work. It's when you work. It's how you work. And ultimately, it's about choice. People want to be empowered and trusted to do their best work as well as live their lives. And so what we see from our research at Future Forum is that in our survey of over 10,000 desk workers, yes, 79% of people want flexibility in where they work, but a whopping 94% want flexibility in when they work. They want schedule flexibility. Now, this isn't my way of saying everybody gets to work whenever they want, 6 a.m. in London or 3 a.m. wherever they're located. Instead, 2/3 of employees want flexibility within a framework. They want some structure around their flexibility. So what does that look like? It could look like core team work hours, agreed upon hours where teams come together to work synchronously, one-on-ones, team meetings, collaboration hours. But outside of those core team work hours, people have the autonomy to do their focused work when works best for them. In addition, it's thinking about meetings. Globally, what we see is that most meetings are a case of presenteeism. We'll talk about that later today, but people are burning out because they feel like they always need to be on. They need to be video on during a meeting, always participating, even though the meeting may not be the best use of their time. So what we propose is something called the 4D model. If the meeting is intended to discuss something specific, debate, decide, or develop your employee, keep the meeting. Otherwise, work asynchronously through your digital channels. What we're seeing from the research, though, is that 2/3 of employees globally, and we're seeing this consistently, are not getting schedule flexibility, and they're nearly 3 times more likely to look for a new job in the next year. So as we talk about mental health, as we talk about the Great Resignation, 70% of people who don't feel like they have choice in how they work, they're looking for a new job in the next year. So this is both a people and a business issue that we need to talk about today.
Thank you, Sheila. My gosh, those rules for those of us that have been around a long time. Can you imagine that would have been the narrative in terms of what the head of HR would have told you even a decade ago? So thank you for sharing what I think is now the new rules of engagement that are here to stay. But let me now throw back to last but not least on the panel, Paul, as the leader of one of the largest talent agencies in the world. Oof, now you have to recruit and retain under these new rules of engagement. I know you've also written about 2 books on leadership, so this is a topic that's always been something that's been a passion for you as well. Care to comment?
Well, thank you, Miki-san. And first of all, at Randstad, we love hashtags. So we got our hashtag for today. Yuka-san, yay. Hashtag yay is trending right now on social media, I believe. Well, thank you for the question. I want to touch on a couple of things that Sheila and the others said. First of all, when we talk about talent attraction, the world has changed. It's not a new normal. It's literally a new world. I was in India until last year for 4 years. I was CEO of Randstad in India. And what an amazing experience. And then, of course, coming back to Japan. And what I discovered in India, and actually very similar to here in Japan, is that the workforce of the future, let's call them the millennials, the Gen Zs, the future, are more interested in purpose than they are in brand. And we heard that in an earlier session, but I can tell you in our efforts to recruit across the world, it's absolutely true. The talent of the future, the first question they're asking is, what does the company stand for? And a lot of companies are not ready for that. A lot of organizations have not given deep thought to their purpose. And often the purpose is a what versus a why. And there's a great quote from Jim Rohn, right? He said, when the why is clear, the how is easy. Start with the why, a compelling why. So that's the first thing that we start to see in terms of trends on talent attraction. Also, gone are the days when companies would use their beautiful office to recruit great talent. It's now a moot point, as Sheila said earlier. People are choosing not to go to the office. Our data at Randstad, surveying our own employees, 45,000 employees, we concluded there were 3 categories. This is around the world. Differs a bit by culture, but basically it goes like this. 15% of our employees don't want to come to the office at all. They want to work completely remotely. And if we don't offer that option, a good percentage will leave. That's clear in the responses. By the way, that matches with a study done by E&Y recently. Very similar. The second group is the largest group. They want this thing called hybrid, and I'm sure we're going to touch on that today. And that group is 65 to 70%. And hybrid is defined by culture. Interestingly, in Japan, it's defined as 2.9 days per week. In the US, 1.8. So hybrid, we need to define what that means. And then the last group, they want to come every day. And when you lift up the layers on that group, interestingly, the largest demographic in that group are people between 25 and 35. They want to be in the office. They want connection. And that's absolutely true in Japan as well. And I'll tell you, when I walk in the office tomorrow, we have 2 categories. We'll call them the millennials to the left and the perennials to the right. The millennials represent the largest number of people in seats in our office.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so where to work, how to work, when to work, all of this is quite important. I also saw some data from the Gallup folks this year on how much does the employee feel like they were appreciated or said thank you or affiliated with their company. So regardless of location, right, I think all of us as leaders have had to figure out how to affiliate and motivate the teams that have been around us. But the number, sadly, is it's 11% of people in the workforce feel like they never get a thank you or hello or whatnot. The number, unfortunately, is double in Japan. And yet again, another statistic where Japan is at the bottom of the list. So in that context, whether you want to speak globally or locally, I wanted to give the panelists just a chance to react to what they just heard from each other. And because since you went first, do you mind if I come back to you? You got to hear everybody else after you as well. But I know that you had some ways of thinking about, so how do you make all of this work? Like, what's your punch list in this world? New ways of working that we're working to create employee well-being.
Yeah, there are so many keywords we are talking about, not only well-being, but I realize all the keywords linked with well-being in the end, because well-being is really the baseline of our like being and our life, our work. So, so I think that's why we all need to know the very important fact, which is we all are responsible for our own well-being. That's maybe one key message I'd like to share. Of course, not only knowing the data or numbers, we all know, well-being is beneficial. But the key point is how then how we can keep our good well-being, as well as how we can increase our well-being. And then study of positive psychology can maybe one good reference for us to learn. So there are so many keywords and a key, message, key actions that we can learn from the positive psychology. And then Martin Seligman, Dr. Martin Seligman is the one who started this positive psychology. And then based on his research, more than 20 plus years, he founds one model help us to increase our own well-being. And then we call it the PAMA, P-E-R-M-A, PAMA model. So this tells the 5 important things, 5 key things that can help us increase our well-being. P means positive emotions. E means engagement. R means relationship. M means meaning. And then A means accomplishment. So these keywords will be the good source for us to feel and then to increase our well-being. So people who feel more positive emotions will get the higher well-being. So that the Dr. Martin Seligman found through his research. And then if we have a good high well-being, there are so many benefits. Longevity, we are healthy, and then as I briefly showed, our performance will go up, as well as our relationship with super, and the resilience will be also increased. So all necessary for our corporate activity. So if we know how to make our well-being higher, thanks to Martin Seligman's research, and everyone maybe keep mind the PAMA every day, every moment, and look back, and then think that maybe in the night before going to bed, just remember, reflect one day, and then how was my positive emotions today, or how was my meaning today? So, I felt the meaning when I do this, the task or do this project. So this kind of reflection in the end of the day would be beneficial, I think, for us to increase our well-being.
Thank you, Gab. That's a lot to think about, and taking our own responsibility as leaders to ourselves, experience well-being, to lead a workforce that is that way as well. Sheila, if I may, I wanted to just come back to you because I know one of the things you write about in your book, as well as what you feel very passionately about, is in addition to us as individuals moving in this way, you talk a lot about the responsibility and perhaps the need to reskill and retrain our middle managers. It's not enough for the top guy or gal to be saying this. So maybe you could speak a few words about that.
Yes, I'm happy to. So what we see from our research is that the most successful executives are demonstrating the behavior that we're discussing. They set the principles and the behavioral guardrails that they want to see within their organization, including leaders need to set the tone from the top. And they're also investing in reskilling their middle managers. There are many ways that we're describing middle managers these days, the frozen middle, the struggling managers, because at the end of the day, what we're seeing is that managers are essentially trying to figure out what their jobs are. Prior to the pandemic, so much of the role of a manager was to gatekeep their employees within the office. And now the expectation has shifted. Their job description has been rewritten to become more empathetic coaches. And what we see from the research is that one of the key contributors to burnout globally is that nearly 50% of people feel the need to show that they're working to their managers as well as to their colleagues. So thinking about that, in addition to your day-to-day work, you also need to be able to show that you're doing your day-to-day work, whether it's always being on, being in the office a lot, responding to messages almost immediately. And so there's something fundamentally broken in terms of the presenteeism that is required of work. And so what we encourage leaders to do is to focus on coaching, feedback, celebrating the managers who are doing this distributed world of work type of leadership well. But in addition, it's really important for them to empower managers to create their own team level agreements. What are the ways in which teams want to work together? What are their core team work hours? How do they want to communicate with one another? And what are some expectations around how they want to build team camaraderie? On a broader scale, and this is the topic I could talk about for hours, we need to shift our mentality around success and performance measurement from presenteeism, from activity-based measurement, outcome-based measurement. Throughout my career, it's been about this person's the first in, the last to leave. They deserve to get promoted. Or I remember my first performance review, it was, Sheila's always on her BlackBerry. She responds to my messages at midnight. She deserves to get promoted. We need to move beyond that to this person has contributed value, has met their goals, has shown the impact. They deserve to be promoted. They deserve to get access to a lot of these opportunities. Otherwise, we're going to continue to burn out our employees who feel like they need to always be on, and also exclude many who are leaving the workforce earlier in their careers because they don't necessarily feel like they can thrive in this environment.
Thank you. I haven't heard the word BlackBerry in a long time. So, but no, and I know pre-COVID, I used to travel like a maniac. Now with, considerations to the environment and all that, we've all dramatically stopped traveling, and now we're picking up again. But I wanted to now come back to you, Paul. I know you talk a lot about, well, we talk, I think in general, the narrative is around work-life balance, but you talk about work-life integration because the lines have indeed become quite blurry. Care to share your thoughts on that?
Sure. I mentioned my time in India, and I should explain a little bit further. I was there during the worst time of COVID when Delta hit. We have 65,000 people in India across 75 offices. And it was a tough time as a leader, I'll tell you. Captaining a ship in the midst of this storm when we had employees dying from COVID. And it was a helpless moment. And that's when I came to understand a couple of things. One, the importance of well-being and health, and not just physical health, but also mental health. For myself as a leader, my leadership team, and all of our colleagues, to ensure they are safe and healthy becomes the most important thing, more than any output metric. And that's kind of a wake-up call for me. If we think about work-life balance versus work-life integration, if I look around the room, a lot of similar, let's say, age groups, certainly on this panel. You remember a day when we didn't have email? We didn't have cell phones? We didn't have internet. We did our job somehow. Amazing. Yeah. And then we walked out the door. When we left the office, work was left behind because you went home. If you have family, you'd be home with your family having dinner, for example. And the phone would rarely ring. And if it rang, the landline, it was a problem. It was probably something urgent, but that was quite unusual. We were able to have a physical separation, even a mental separation. We don't have that anymore. We have no choice but to integrate work into our life. And that's an okay thing. That's well-being, about family, self, community, your colleagues, and so on. And so that's something that I'm promoting heavily. Your point, Sheila, you said it about walking the talk. I literally just came back from a long walk. I did Ohenro in Shikoku. I got back last night, 88 temples. I'm on my way. I haven't done them all yet, but Mika-san, who's here from my team, who's our SNS captain, she will post photos from my journey, and we look at our engagement scores, all the things we announce on our intranet and so on, new initiatives, incentives, and so on. The posts that get the most likes and the most comments are pictures of me walking on Ohenro, which is remarkable when you think about it. So I think the whole notion of work-life integration is about leaders walking the talk, encouraging it, celebrating leaders who do that. And instead of saying this leader and this team, his or her team, gets results, we say this leader, his or her team, creates a culture where everyone can shine and be well and gets results. And those are the leaders we need to celebrate.
Thank you for sharing those stories. I would like to check out those posts, Paul, later. But bringing it back to Japan, Seiji, as I've already mentioned, and some of our panelists have mentioned, some of these global trends, we're pretty slow in adopting them in terms of speed and urgency. And I know you've done a good job in your company, but I've also seen some data that BCG has just published on. We have a think tank called the Henderson Institute, and we interviewed, in fact, 20 to 40-year-olds in Japan, and again, asked the question around their well-being and happiness. And it may not surprise you that the least happy people are workers in corporate Japan. The most happy are those that are working in NPOs. The second happy folks were actually the women that stay at home and work to take care of their children and whatnot. And then I think the doctors came next and so on and so forth. But the punchline is, if we look at the Japanese average, corporate Japan is below average. And I know you're trying to do what you can to raise the average, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about how do we make sure we don't fall behind on this trend as we may have in others.
Thank you, Miki-san. I'm beginning to understand what I stand for. I think everyone in this room embrace well-being and understand the virtue of well-being. But, Daiichi Life is a 120-year-old company. And yes, I'm very much motivated in promoting well-being in my company, but it's hard. Yes, so it's easy to be nice to your employees, but it's different to be nice to your employees. So you have to, corporate culture, I said, it is a strength of each company, and it can also it can be a backlash because business model has to change and evolve. I think Daiichi Life and all the very large corporates in Japan has had a very successful business model post-war and economic boom. But we lagged behind in alter our business model. So I do one-on-one meetings with my executives. I do town hall meetings and talk about the importance of life insurance and protections and asset accumulations, not to outlive your savings, and all sort of things. I do a blog on my intranet. I do a couple of blogs updated weekly, but it's only half of the solution. The other half is the incentive system that is kind of embedded in the company. So I think most of the Japanese companies have very strong incentives to the top line and bottom line that you have to achieve, and that's that worked really well in the economy that is booming. But now in this VUCA world, you have to challenge your new concept, revisit your business model, and think about what we stand for. So that is very hard and not easy. So I have to do all sort of tweaks and remodeling of our, and actually I'm doing redesigning the incentive system of our workforce, and which is very tough. So I think the audience understand everything about what I'm talking about. But as a corporate Japan and representing that, it's not just being nice and promoting well-being to our employees. You have to change all over the business model to counter this difficult world. So I think I should mention that at this point.
Thank you for your words of wisdom and advice. I'm going to go to Q&A in just one more moment, but I didn't know if the panelists wanted to say one more word of advice to the audience or what you've taken away from the conversation so far, and then I will open it up. So anyone care to go first? Oh, Inagi-san, please.
Yeah, so I can talk about our investor cap, and we do research, and the figure that I want to introduce is not conducted by us, but there's still a gap in perception between the investors and corporates. So this is a research done by Sumitomo Trust. The disclosure of human capitals. So in Japan, it is heavily discussed how to report about non-financial matrix on your 10K, on your disclosure. And most of the investors regards employment engagement as high priority to be disclosed on their integrated reports on their disclosure. But actually, if we ask the same question to the corporates, only 4% actually disclose those kind of figures. And that I think is a mirror of the mentality of corporate Japan. So our corporate leaders has to be much more aware how we embrace the human capital of each corporation. I just wanted to add.
No, thank you for that very valuable addition. I know some of us were at the diversity and female empowerment panel, and Kathy Matsui also talked about the fact that in fact Japan is one, versus the U.S. We actually do require disclosure of female employees and board members and managers and so on. So this may be the beginning of a good trend if we do this, because I don't think there's such requirement, for example, in the U.S. capital markets at this point in time. So again, back to the panelists, one more word each from you, and then I'll open up.
I have just a quick comment to follow up again on something that Sheila said. I'm leading a global initiative with Randstad across our offices. We have more than 5,000 offices around the world to rethink the purpose of the office. A lot of companies let go of a lot of real estate due to COVID. And we see a lot of leaders now thinking about what is the world going to look like as we come out of COVID, and what is the purpose of the office. A lot of companies are struggling with this, how to size or right size depending on the new way of working. And so we did a lot of surveys and had a lot of hot debates across borders, across demographics, and came to a conclusion. The purpose of the office, at least for us moving forward, will be three things. One, a place to collaborate. Two, a place to innovate. And three, a place to celebrate. Nowhere in there do you hear the word work. Isn't that interesting? And the approval rating of this model is extremely high. The office is a place to be together. That's where the magic happens, where ideas are born, and that's where celebrations happen when, we achieve our goals and so on, and it creates the culture. Around that, how you work, when you work, again, to what Sheila said, is completely flexible. So that's, let's say, our simple conclusion about the role of the office in the new world.
Thank you. Yuko or Sheila?
Yeah. Can I go? Yeah, I fully agree what Paul said regarding the objective of or roles of office. When I was in Unilever during the time of COVID, we renovate the office floors. We reduced one floor and then kept the 4 floors and then changed dramatically the old design. And then I redefined the objective of keeping the office is two. One is mingle. So mingling with people for collaboration, for innovation and celebration. I really like that. And the second point is to feel the culture of the company. So I am a member of Unilever. That confidence is very important because after, during the COVID, we feel less connection with the people that would really damage the level of every people's well-being. So I fully agree and echo what Paul said. And in the last comment from me is I would like to take the expression that Sheila uses. It's all about choice. I agree with that. There is another expression I found very beneficial in the field of positive psychology, which is happiness is a choice. So we can select, we can choose happy side. And it's all about choice. It's all about decision. So I think maybe what we can do as a corporate to provide some hints or some occasion to employees around well-being is tell them or provide them some knowledge, but at the same time, trust them and then create the opportunity for them to choose. So the choice is totally up to them. So that's maybe my last comment.
Thank you very much, Sheila. I see you vigorously nodding to all the panelists' comments. So over to you. Your turn.
I'm feeling the energy all the way across the world. Yes, I agree with what everyone said. And, we talk about the role of the office. All of the data shows that 76% of people want to come into the office to celebrate, to innovate, as well as get to know each other better. I also believe, yes, the future of work is about choice, but ultimately that's premised on trust, to Yuka-san's point. And a great quote I heard a few weeks ago was from the head of HR at Spotify. And she said, if you hire adults and treat them like children, this is all going to backfire. We need to shift this conversation from command and control or power to one about trust and choice. And what we are seeing through these trends is people want to hear thank you more. They want to see investment in their own professions. They want to feel like they're a valued part of the organization. And so now is the time for us to start treating our employees like humans that they are, and embrace their richer, fuller lives outside of their work, to Paul's earlier point. And I'm very excited to have this conversation today because, to your earlier point, Nikki, so much of this conversation was not present 10 years ago or even 3 years ago. And now's an opportunity for us to redesign how we're leading and managing our employees.
Thank you so much. Okay, let me open it up to the audience. I think there are microphones. Mr. Jesper Cole. Can you bring a mic? Were you raising your hand? Yeah, I think Jesper. He got my eye first, and then we'll go to you, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your comments. Quick question. Talk to me about motivation. There's plenty of smart people estimating that somewhere between 30 and 50% of service sector jobs are going to be made redundant by smart machines. What motivates employees in your companies?
Would anyone like to take that?
Thank you, Jesper. Great question. So we know that overall Japan has among the lowest engagement scores according to most of the measurements. We know that. Although we also know there's a bell curve built in. If anybody uses Net Promoter Score, you know that a 7 in Japan is probably equivalent to a 9 or a 10 in the US. But still, we know there's an element out there of people who are not satisfied and engaged. I think it comes back to a lot to what we heard earlier about simple things like thank you, being appreciated. And we see that as well in our own engagement surveys and studies, that the people who are not engaged are the ones that don't feel appreciated, first of all. And the industry you talk about, Jesper, is probably one of the most underappreciated industries. It's a high turnover, it's tough work, you're constantly on your feet, and you're dealing with issues and crises and so on. So I think the key point here, regardless of the industry, whether we have more than 5,000 clients that we work with in Japan, every manufacturer right down to the corporate offices as well. And of course, hospitality. What we find is the common denominator, the companies that are doing well to attract talent and retain talent, regardless of the industry, are finding a way to make their people feel appreciated and valued. And that can be done on the front line of someone who's in the service industry as well.
Yes,
So we can actually. Oh, so go ahead, Sue. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. Yes. So one of our partners at Future Forum is Boston Consulting Group, and they recently conducted a study around deskless workers. And what the study shows is very consistent with what Paul just mentioned in terms of being able to show commitment and support of deskless workers, spending time to build that frontline first culture is critical. People want to feel like they're being listened to, and they also want to feel like they're receiving transparent and honest communication. In addition, it's flexibility, it's hearing thank you more, and it's continued investment in their own upskilling. So I think it comes back to the future of work is about trust, building that more transparent communication, and showing your dedication through investment.
Thank you. Thank you for the BCG plug. I'm actually producing a report next month to talk about women in the workforce in Japan. The good news is I think corporate Japan has progressed in terms of structural solutions to keep their employees happy. But yes, to your point, a third of the jobs of 5 years from now don't exist today, and a third of the jobs today may get automated away. So it is all about reskilling. But it's interesting to me, having been in this business a long time, sometimes the soft stuff is the hard stuff. So I think the hard structural solutions are very clear, but this squishy affiliation thing and saying thank you, all that is data says is actually very, very important. And I don't think the narrative said that 5 years ago. Seiji wants to say a word, and I will
Yes.
take an online question next after I take one more question from the room.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about our experience at Daiichi. There are a lot of clerical works that existed in the regional office, and now we are centralizing that everything. So it's a relocation of work. And there was a huge backlash from our employees. So they were doing, middle office, back office job, and suddenly we asked them to do customer interface, to visit our customers and provide consulting. But actually, their engagement increased, their score increased because doing a mid office, back office job and compare it to having a live interaction with our customer, and they have their talents because they can do the middle back office. They know everything about life insurance, but they are a little bit scared in tackling a new job. So I think we should utilize and leverage on our human resources and not to, shift everything and spin out or, the liquidity is not there in the labor market yet. So, and if we encourage our employees, they have their talents and they can be successful also.
Thank you. Let me take one more question from the room, and we'll go to the online question. Sir?
Thank you for today. I came from a American holding affiliated company, and as Seisan said that COVID-19 is completely changed our situation, and sometimes good, but my company's headache is to have lots of reporting to senior president. If we say weekly report, there is every day. I have to write weekly report every day. And for Yan-san, Ye-san, how to communicate to employees? I would like to know some great tips if you like, if you have.
So the question is, how do you communicate to them when they have a routine, repeatable job and keep them motivated? Or
Yes, because I think that
how to not write those reports?
because the main problem is that the motivated people is like a high pressure, so that is the main headache, I think. And so I would like to hear Yay company is doing such company communication.
Thank you very much for calling me Yay. Now I am not managing or looking after the people in my new company. I used to manage and I used to work with many more people. So let me please share some hands-on experience based on the fact that I have been HR head of Unilever mainly. So when I heard your question, I feel like there was less trust from the manager or the people. So every week, reporting, it's just burdensome, I think. As long as the leader trusts the people, perhaps, of course, some report may be necessary, but it doesn't necessarily like a week report, something like that. So going back to the first question in terms of motivation, everyone has a different factor of motivation. But our research also says that the sense of control is one factor. So when the people feel, okay, I'm responsible for something and my manager trusts me, and then I have a control for scheduling, for the process, for the speed, those kind of things. And then we are able to feel the level of motivation. So when I was the HR head of the big corporation, I really respect the everyone's wish for the project or wish for the task or the work. So which means in another way of expression is let them to use their strength. So strengths the definition of strengths in positive psychology is things that the person like and the things that the person is good at. So 好きなこと、得意なこと in Japanese. So that is the definition of strength. So let people to do what they love. So that is really the baseline. So if people can be like that, the communication style will be a little bit different. So for me, like I noticed that most of the case, people try to pick up the downside or things that he or she is not good at, or things that not yet completed. The first we look at that and then comment on that. So maybe we can change the order of the communication. First, we realize the progress or things that the people could do. So sense of progress also another factor of self-motivation. So those kind of things I used when to communicate with the people. So at this moment, I don't have a people to manage, but I always remember these kind of things and to communicate when to do some project. Because in my case at this moment, although I don't have a people to manage in my company, but I have a tons of people to collaborate and then make things happen at one time. So in this situation, I cannot do everything. So I trust and I rely on, and then I try to focus on the people who what he or she likes. So that's maybe a comment.
Thank you for your question and response, Yuka-san. One question from the online audience, please.
So this question is to the panel in general. How do you find a balance between the older generation of employees and the new generation of employees?
Sheila, do you want to jump in first? Did you hear the question?
I did hear the question. Thank you. I think it comes back to choice and figuring out what works best for employees, regardless of what their age may be. I think a lot of the conversation right now is optimized towards digital natives, the younger generation, what they want. What we see consistently globally is that, yes, there are variants between age groups, but ultimately, even older employees want more choice in how they work, both in terms of location flexibility as well as schedule flexibility. This comes back to the role of the manager and having conversations with their employees of what works best for them and building agreements accordingly. I think that a lot of these one-size-fits-all models we're seeing in the broader ecosystem around top-down policies, there's a reason why resistance is happening. It's assuming that everybody's work styles and all work is one-size-fits-all. So I encourage leaders to think about how to tailor their principles, their guardrails, as well as their own team-level agreements to meet the needs of all types of employees through these conversations.
Thank you, Sheila. Anyone else on the panel want to comment?
Well, if we talk about balance between the two, the reality is the clock is ticking. The demographics show that by 2025 in Japan, the balance will be shifted dramatically and increasingly towards the younger generation. They will enter the workforce, and in Japan particularly, but certainly around the world, the aging workforce will start to exit. And so that balance, so let's say imbalance is coming. I would take the question from a different angle. How can we ensure that there's a balance of collaboration between these two groups? And going back to what happened here with COVID, certainly probably the leaders on the stage would agree, none of us had a playbook on how to handle this thing, nor how to lead in this new way of working. It's so alien to all of us. And so for many of the leaders who are from that older generation, they're now faced with young, eager, ambitious people who are curious and are deeply motivated by purpose. And so it comes back to how we're going to lead in that way. And you used a word, Sheila, called presenteeism, which I really like. It's being used more and more recently. I don't like it as a concept, but it's a real phenomenon. For leaders who grew up in a world where the people we worked with were near us, within sight, physically close to us. This is a new world. How do we measure performance? How do we ensure that we're not biased towards people who show up physically in the office? Because you could have some superstars who rarely, if ever, come in the office. How do we ensure that they get equal opportunity to grow and accelerate with the company?
Is something.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment on the experience at Daiichi. When the COVID hit in April 2020. So life insurance is a face-to-face consulting. So we stopped our new business activity for 6 months. All the branch offices, their sales goals no longer exists. So I protected the salary for our sales agents, who are basically commission-based. I protected the salaries, what they earned. I protected the full amount. And I asked each branch to give back to your customer and your communities. So what they did is they provided masks to their clients and their corporates, and they engaged in local activities. And suddenly, the older generation and the younger generation, there was no gap in minds, and they kind of converged very, very nicely. And the people who are on the elderly group didn't know what to do and get paralyzed for a moment. But the younger generations, who are more engaged and embrace the concept of well-being, they asked the local municipals what they can do to serve their communities. And those mindsets or which provides impact activities can create a change in companies. That is my experience. I joined Daiichi 36 years ago, so I'm basically in the group of old generation. And my mindset when I joined Daiichi, work is what is given and not to choose. But the younger generation, the concept is completely different. And you have to, give credit to the people, to the older generation. They did a fantastic job during the economic boom, but their mindset is still, some people are still, work is given and not, you have to search for what you want to do. And with that experience during COVID, we kind of, embraced what we stand for and what the local community needs and what our customer needs. So those kind of events or which provides impacts is very useful in changing the mindset and converge the concept between the age groups.
Thank you. Yes,
Just one quick example, maybe to support the idea of collaboration between the generations. What I did at Unilever is a reverse mentoring, which works so good, so well. So assigning the mentor, usually we assign mentor to older people or experienced people, but we assign mentor as the new people, like MT, management trainee, senior shain, new grads. And then starting from management team, including a CEO, we became mentee and then learn from them. First, their reaction, there means that management reaction was not that positive. But when it started, they enjoyed a lot. And then that would help the management team to really unlearn the things that they have already captured. So maybe that it can be one good example for you to do.
Thank you for sharing those stories. We have another question from online audience, please.
So this one again is for the general panel. So Japan culturally has a normality of working long hours and spending more time at the office, which can become counterproductive. How can well-being be promoted to alter the reward long working hour employee mindset?
I do think the new reality has set in, but I think as a gentleman raised earlier, some of those old norms don't go away. Any tips in terms of, I guess, reduction of hours in a country like Japan? Or have you actually seen it?
It's a real part of my world. At Randstad, I get a weekly report on Friday of our overtime hours. And if you're familiar with the law in Japan, it's very strict about limitations on overtime. And so that report comes in and we have red, yellow, green in categories. And we have a large number, I'll say it openly, of employees that are working beyond the limit. And we run a risk of a few things. One, having our license suspended if we don't address the issue or show a strong effort to do so. That's our company, but that's certainly across all industries and all companies. The issue here is partly about the work as a place to be, the office as a place to be, work as a destination. And I think we all know traditionally in Japan, the workplace was a place to be, to spend time, not necessarily productive time, but time in the office. But in our new world, this issue of overtime becomes a real issue. And I think the other point to make is that back to the favoritism and presenteeism. What we need to do is start celebrating people who make impact and do it in less time. And that's something, we heard about the appraisal where you got the box ticked because you worked really long hours. That should be taken off any form of evaluation, time spent versus impact.
So, yeah, so long hours, overtime, of course. Sorry.
Go
ahead. Of course, the issue from the perspective of labor law. But for me as a HR person, to be honest, if I can be bored, I don't care about the hours of the working. As long as the person is really focused and then getting the, flow, in that situation, we usually lose the sense of time and then just focus on and enjoy, and then with the good, the well-being, positive emotions. So as long as we are aware of our mental and health condition, for me, like long hours is not an issue. But this requires sending a very important message. The objective of saying this, and then employees need to be responsible for taking care of the health. So of course we need to support as a corporate, but it's not about the length of the hours, is my view.
Thank you. Sheila, do you want to come in?
I just wanted to underscore what Paul had said earlier, is that we needed to celebrate managers who, yes, deliver on the outcomes, their teams deliver on the outcomes, and they're embodying cultures of well-being, both from modeling from the top as well as supporting their employees. I think that we need to really think about how we're measuring effective managers, both from a performance perspective as well as a well-being perspective. And I'm going to take that with me from today's conversation.
Thank you. Well, I think we're just about time. Thank you very much for the engagement. I hope we've met our goal of discussing crafting new ways of working for better well-being. So a great big applause to our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much, guys.